Under the blinding lights of the T-Mobile Arena, anticipation rippled through the crowd like a living, breathing thing. Every seat was filled, every eye fixed on the octagon, where the night's most electrifying showdown was about to unfold. From the roar of the fans to the buzz of restless conversations, it felt as if the very air had been charged with something fierce and uncontainable. Jon Jones, a name etched deep into the chronicles of the sport, stood in his corner with the cold composure of a man who had been here countless times before. A fighter often described as untouchable, his presence carried an almost mythical weight. His eyes narrowed, a hint of a smirk tracing his lips as he bounced lightly on his feet, loose and ready. It was the gaze of a man who had dismantled legends, who had danced on the edge of greatness, and made it his own. But across the cage, Dominick Reyes was no mere challenger. Younger, hungrier, with a look of fierce determination burning in his eyes. His undefeated record wasn't a lucky streak, it was the product of relentless training, precision striking, and a belief that he could do what so many others had failed to achieve. Reyes had walked through the division with a quiet ferocity, dismantling contenders with a ruthless efficiency that left fans questioning if he was the one destined to shatter Jones's reign. The clash wasn't just about a belt or a title defense. It was a collision of legacies, an intersection where destiny and desperation met head-on. For Jon Jones, it was another night to cement his supremacy, to remind the world that he remained untouchable. For Dominick Reyes, it was the opportunity a lifetime, the chance to seize the throne from a man many considered unbeatable. As the fighters were introduced, their eyes locked across the cage, neither man blinking. Reyes' fists clenched at his sides, muscles coiled like springs ready to explode. Jones, cool and calculating, appeared almost serene, his calmness a dangerous counterpoint to the intensity radiating from his opponent. This wasn't just another title defense for Jones. It was a challenge to his legacy, a test against a man who refused to be intimidated by the weight of his reputation. The bell rang, slicing through the noise like a knife. Instantly, both fighters moved with the precision of predators, circling, feinting, searching for the slightest hint of weakness. Jones's reach advantage was evident, his arms extending like coiled whips, keeping Reyes at bay. But Reyes wasn't there to be toyed with. He pushed forward with a tenacity that startled even the most seasoned observers, throwing combinations with blistering speed and power. Jones's defense was a masterpiece of anticipation and reaction. He slipped punches with a grace that seemed almost effortless, his counterattacks sharp and unforgiving. But Reyes kept pressing, refusing to be cowed by the legend's aura. Each strike he landed seemed to chip away at the mystique surrounding Jones, drawing gasps from the audience as blows connected with a force that demanded respect. By the end of the first round, the energy in the arena had shifted. Reyes had not only survived but thrived, forcing Jones to react, to adapt in ways he hadn't been forced to in years. Sweat gleamed on their bodies as they returned to their corners, coaches barking instructions with urgent intensity. For the first time in a long while, Jon Jones looked human. The second round opened with an intensity that surpassed the first. Reyes came out swinging, his strikes precise and relentless. Jones answered with his own brutal efficiency. A low kick here, a stiff jab there, measuring his opponent's reactions. But Reyes kept pressing, refusing to fade under the pressure. His footwork was sharp, his strikes calculated, each one thrown with the kind of determination that made fans sit up and take notice. As minutes bled into one another, the battle transformed from a contest of skill to a war of wills. Jones's expression remained cold, but there was something different about his movements. A subtle hesitation, a flicker of frustration as Reyes continued to push him to the edge. Every attempt to control the fight was met with resistance, every strategy countered by Reyes' relentless assault. By the time the third round began, it was clear to everyone watching that this was no ordinary fight. Jon Jones was being tested in ways he hadn't been for years, his invincibility questioned by a man who refused to be broken. Reyes' strikes grew more confident, his attacks sharper, more daring. And through it all, Jones remained composed, his gaze never leaving his opponent, his mind working furiously to unravel the puzzle that Reyes had become. But just as it seemed Reyes might break through, Jones unleashed a series of moves so precise, so devastating, that the audience erupted with a mix of shock and admiration. A brutal elbow, a calculated knee to the body, strikes that bore the mark of a champion desperate to maintain his throne. Reyes staggered but didn't fall, his eyes blazing with defiance even as the pain rippled through him. The momentum swung wildly between them, each moment a battle within itself. Jones's experience and creativity against Reyes' raw power and unyielding resolve. With each passing second, the tension grew thicker, the stakes higher. Blood, sweat, and sheer willpower stained the canvas as the fighters continued their relentless struggle. Then, just as the fourth round was about to begin, something changed. Jones's expression flickered, a shadow of doubt passing over his face. Reyes saw it, seized on it like a predator sensing weakness. He charged forward, his fists crashing into Jones with a fury that left the crowd roaring in disbelief. Jones stumbled, his footing unsteady, his defenses momentarily compromised. But was it enough? Had Reyes finally found the key to breaking the champion's grip on the division? Or was this just another chapter in the legend of Jon Jones, a momentary stumble before reclaiming his dominance? As the round continued, the answer remained unclear, the outcome hanging in the balance, teetering between triumph and defeat. And as the fighters returned to their corners once more, the arena buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with suspense. The fourth round opened with a frenzy of motion, both fighters launching into each other with a desperation that only grew sharper as the seconds bled away. Dominick Reyes pressed forward, his strikes fueled by an urgency that spoke of someone who refused to be content with merely surviving. Each blow was calculated, ruthless, aimed not just to score points but to dismantle the man in front of him. The crowd sensed the shift, a buzz rippling through the arena as Reyes attacked with the ferocity of a man chasing destiny. Jon Jones, the seasoned champion, responded with flashes of brilliance. His elbows cut through the air with precision. His knees drilled into Reyes' body with a force that would have crumpled lesser men. Yet for every strike he landed, Reyes had an answer. Quick counters, devastating hooks, kicks delivered with surgical precision. The octagon had become a battleground where finesse and raw power clashed in a brutal, unrelenting rhythm. But something else was brewing beneath the surface, an undercurrent of frustration that began to edge into Jones' movements. For all his experience, all his mastery of timing and distance, he was finding himself matched in ways he hadn't anticipated. Reyes' unpredictability had thrown him off balance, and the champion's attempts to impose his will were met with resistance that seemed to grow fiercer with every exchange. And then it happened, a sudden flurry from Reyes, a sequence so fast and precise it left Jones momentarily stunned. A right hand connected cleanly with Jones' chin, snapping his head back with a force that drew gasps from the crowd. The champion stumbled, his footing momentarily lost, his eyes narrowing as he fought to regain control. Reyes didn't hesitate. He pressed forward, his attacks relentless, his strikes hammering against Jones' defenses with a fury that bordered on reckless. Yet even in the midst of that chaos, Jones displayed the instincts of a man who had faced adversity before. He clinched, tangled Reyes up against the cage, using his experience to slow the assault. But it was clear to everyone watching, something had shifted. The aura of invincibility that Jones carried had been cracked, if only slightly, and Reyes, sensing that crack, was determined to widen it. The pace only intensified as the round continued, neither man willing to concede an inch. Jones tried to reassert his control, employing his wrestling to drag Reyes to the ground. But Reyes resisted, his takedown defense sharper than anyone expected. Even when Jones managed to get him down, Reyes scrambled back to his feet with a defiance that sent a murmur of disbelief through the crowd. Time seemed to stretch and contract with every exchange, the moments blurring together in a whirlwind of violence and skill. Jones's strikes grew more precise, his counters more vicious. But Reyes met him with a resilience that bordered on madness, his own attacks landing with a force that left Jones' expression hardened, eyes dark with concentration. Then, as the round neared its end, something truly unexpected happened. Jones, perhaps seeking to break the stalemate or perhaps simply driven by instinct, launched a spinning elbow aimed directly at Reyes' temple. It was a move he had perfected over years of competition, a weapon that had ended fights before they even had a chance to truly begin. But Reyes, showing a level of anticipation that caught even the most seasoned observers off guard, ducked beneath the strike with a fluidity that seemed almost effortless. And in that instant, as Jones's momentum carried him slightly off balance, Reyes exploded forward with a counter left hook that smashed into Jones's jaw with the kind of power that left the audience momentarily stunned into silence. Jones stumbled back, his eyes momentarily glazed, his footing unsteady. Reyes pounced, unleashing a barrage of strikes that had Jones retreating for the first time in the fight. Blood trickled from a cut above the champion's eyebrow, his expression a mixture of shock and grim determination. The crowd erupted, their roars deafening as they witnessed something few thought possible. Jon Jones, pushed to the edge, forced into survival mode by a challenger who refused to yield. Yet even as Reyes pressed forward, a new kind of tension began to creep into the air. Jones was hurt, that much was obvious. But his eyes remained sharp, his movements calculated even as he fought to regain control. It was as if the adversity had awakened something within him, a primal instinct buried beneath years of dominance. The bell rang, the round ending, with both fighters standing in the center of the octagon, their chests heaving, eyes locked. Neither man looked away, their gazes locked in a silent challenge that spoke louder than any words ever could. As they returned to their corners, the audience buzzed with a feverish excitement. This was no longer just a fight. It was a battle for legacy, a test of wills that neither man seemed willing to lose. And yet, the unexpected twist hadn't fully played out. As the camera panned to Jones' corner, his team's voices were urgent, their expressions strained. They spoke of strategy, adjustments, all the things one might expect. But there was something else, something that the cameras couldn't quite capture, but that the audience could feel. A sense of desperation, a realization that the night was slipping away from them, faster than they could grasp. Reyes in his corner looked fresh despite the war he had just endured. His coach's words were steady, encouraging, their confidence radiating through him. But even as Reyes prepared to continue his assault, there was an awareness that Jones was far from broken. The champion had been pushed to the edge, but he hadn't fallen. Not yet. The crowd's noise became a dull roar, a backdrop to the unfolding drama. Jones's corner worked furiously to patch him up, their voices growing louder, their instructions sharper. And as the fighters prepared to rise for the next round, the arena seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when the tide would either turn completely or crash back with a vengeance. No one expected what happened next. As the fifth round was about to begin, a subtle but unmistakable limp emerged in Jones's step. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but it didn't go unnoticed by Reyes. Nor did it escape the eyes of the thousands watching, their anticipation sharpening to a razor's edge. Was it an injury? A tactic to lure Reyes in? Or perhaps the first visible crack in the armor of a man who had dominated the division for so long? Whatever the answer, it added a fresh layer of intrigue to a battle that had already defied expectations. And as the fighters moved toward each other once more, the stakes had never been higher. The fifth round began with a strange, almost eerie calm. Reyes' eyes sharpened as he noticed the subtle limp in Jon Jones' step, a detail that seemed almost too good to be true. But caution had no place here, not with the championship hanging in the balance. Reyes surged forward, his attacks fueled by the knowledge that Jones was finally vulnerable. Every strike was thrown with conviction, every movement guided by the single-minded pursuit of victory. Jones, however, was far from finished. Whatever damage he had sustained, whether from the brutal exchanges or something deeper, he masked it with the instincts of a man who had spent his life conquering adversity. Even as Reyes continued his onslaught, Jones responded with counterattacks sharp enough to keep his opponent wary. He pivoted, dodged, and lashed out with strikes that spoke of desperation and brilliance intertwined. The audience was locked into the action, their voices a steady, throbbing pulse that matched the rhythm of the fighters' clash. For every step Reyes took forward, Jones found a way to hold his ground. Yet there was something different now, something raw and unfiltered in the way Jones fought. His precision remained, but the smoothness of his movements had been replaced by a grayer, more primal approach. But Reyes refused to be dissuaded. His strikes came faster, his combinations delivered with a force that rattled Jones to his core. The sweat and blood that marked both fighters' bodies were proof of the brutality they had endured. Yet neither man showed any signs of quitting. With every punch Reyes threw, with every kick Jones launched, the tension built toward a breaking point. Midway through the round, Jones managed to secure a clinch, his arms locking around Reyes' body with a grip that spoke of desperation and calculation all at once. Using his wrestling expertise, Jones drove Reyes against the cage, pressing his way into him as he searched for any opening to exploit. Reyes struggled, his muscles straining as he tried to break free, but Jones' grip was relentless, his strength still formidable despite the grueling battle. Seconds bled away as they grappled, their bodies locked in a vicious struggle for dominance. Jones's breathing was labored, but his focus never wavered. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, he executed a sweep that brought Reyes crashing to the canvas. The crowd roared, their excitement surging as the champion finally asserted himself in a way that felt definitive. But Reyes wasn't ready to surrender his dream. From his back, he launched elbows and punches with a ferocity that left Jones's face contorted in pain. The ground battle became a chaotic scramble, Reyes refusing to be held down, his defiance a testament to his unyielding resolve. He twisted, rolled, and managed to push Jones off just long enough to scramble back to his feet. Both men were exhausted, their bodies battered and their movements growing heavier. But their eyes remained locked, the fire of competition burning as intensely as ever. Jones pressed forward, his strikes measured and strategic, but there was a desperation to his movements now, a sense that the fight was slipping from his grasp. And then Reyes did something that no one expected. As Jones closed the distance, looking to clinch once again, Reyes feigned fatigue. His shoulders sagged, his hands lowered just enough to give the impression of a man running on fumes. Jones, eyes gleaming with the predatory instincts of a champion, lunged forward to capitalize. But the moment Jones committed, Reyes exploded with a perfectly timed uppercut, his fist crashing into Jones' jaw with such force that the champion's knees buckled. The crowd erupted in disbelief, their cheers blending with gasps as Jones staggered backward, his body swaying from the devastating blow. Reyes surged forward, unleashing a torrent of punches that pushed Jones against the cage. The strikes were relentless, his fists a blur as they connected with a precision and power that seemed almost impossible for someone who had already endured so much. Jones's defenses crumbled, his arms dropping as Reyes continued his assault. But even then, Jones refused to fall. Somehow, through sheer willpower, he clung to consciousness, his eyes glazed but still burning with the desire to keep fighting. The referee hovered nearby, ready to intervene if Jones could no longer defend himself. And just when it seemed like the end was inevitable, Jones ducked under a wild hook from Reyes and clinched once more, desperately dragging his opponent to the mat. The final seconds of the round were a tangled, brutal mess of fists, elbows, and desperate attempts to establish control. Reyes continued to attack from the ground, his strikes still potent, but Jones clung to him like a man fighting off the darkness itself. When the bell finally rang, both fighters collapsed onto the canvas, their bodies spent, their chests heaving as they struggled to breathe. The decision went to the judges, their faces tight with concentration as they reviewed the brutal spectacle that had just unfolded. The arena buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with uncertainty. Reyes had pushed Jones to the brink, had struck with a ferocity that left even his harshest critics in awe. But Jones had survived, had endured the kind of punishment that would have broken most men. When the announcement finally came, the arena erupted. Jones's hand was raised, the victory awarded by the narrowest of margins. The decision was met with a mixture of cheers and boos. Fans split between admiration for Jones's resilience and disbelief that Reyes' performance hadn't earned him the title. But the true twist came later, when analysts and fans began dissecting the fight, replaying every moment to determine what had truly transpired. Footage emerged showing that Jones's limp was real, an injury sustained early in the bout that had only worsened with every exchange. Yet he had fought through it, masking the pain with sheer determination. And for Reyes, the loss was both a heartbreak and a revelation. He had pushed the greatest of all time to the edge, had exposed cracks in Jones's armor that many believed didn't exist. The defeat didn't diminish his performance. It elevated it, cementing his place among the elite. As the fighters left the arena, their faces etched with exhaustion and respect, the fans were left with one undeniable truth. They had witnessed something extraordinary. A battle where legacy and ambition clashed with such ferocity that the outcome felt almost secondary to the journey itself. And while Jon Jones remained the champion, the shadow of Dominick Reyes loomed large, a reminder that even the greatest could be brought to the edge of defeat.